warm welcome to another edition of Bridge to India's RE Views, a live and interactive session in which we discuss pertinent topics from the renewable power industry. In today's session, we will be talking about the open access solar market, covering a range of topics like policy landscape, state-wise market potential, consumer perspective, new business models, and much more. For today's discussion, we have with us Mr. Harshal Kalankar, Associate Director, Cleantech Solar, and Mr. Kartikeya Sharma, Head of Growth and Strategy at Sunsure Energy. We also want to take this opportunity to thank Sunsure for sponsoring this event. Ms. Sangeeta Suresh, Associate Director, Bridge to India, will steer the conversation and set the context. Please send us your questions on the topic in the chat box, and we'll take them up towards the end of the discussion. So let's now begin the session. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you. Thank you, Ankita. Thank you, Harshal, and thank you, Kartik, for being here on this event. This is the third edition of RE Views. It's a platform where we have in-depth discussions about the topic we choose with experts. So we're very happy to host you on this third session of RE Views. Welcome once again. Before we have our chat, our hour-long chat, I would like to sort of set the stage for what is the status of open access solar in India. So towards that, and from there we will take it, to where it's going next and what we are hoping to see in the next year or so. So Ankita, if you go on to the next slide, and if you could share it in the screen share mode, please. Ankita, can you hear me?
Yes, Sangeeta.
Yeah. Move to the next slide in the screen share mode, please. Yes. So this is where capacity addition is at. This is the landscape in India today. So as you can see, there has been a steady 600 to 700 megawatt capacity addition every year since 2017. 2017 is when the volume, I think we've lost the screen share. So 2017 is when the prices started dropping for modules, for equipment, as well as many states started offering incentives. So that's when it became an attractive proposition. So since 2017, there has been a steady 600 megawatt capacity addition, with the exception of the year 2018, when Karnataka's Big Bang incentives were sort of came to an end. That's a huge 1.4 gigawatt capacity addition happened. So apart from that little blip, the market has been pretty steady. Last year was a bit of a problem. As we all know, there was the pandemic and there was a slowdown. So the FY20 and a little bit of 2021 saw a little bit of dip, but the market has since picked up. If you see the numbers for FY 2021, we're almost at a gigawatt, which is the highest that's been added in the last 4-5 years. So almost a gigawatt of capacity has been added. And we believe that this is really just we believe the trend is picking up for two reasons. One, of course, the incentives continue to come in from various states. We will talk about them as we go ahead. The states keep opening up, and the market moves to those states. That's of course one. And on the other side, there is big consumer demand. It is no longer only about cost savings. It is about corporate responsibility. It is about sustainability, and there is huge consumer demand coming in, and this is going to drive the market up, and that is what we're going to discuss further today. If you can you go to the next slide, please, Ankita? So as you can see here, we are going to be discussing the last year's trends and what is coming up in the next year. And in that context, if you see the last 12 months, there's been very interesting trends in capacity addition. So this shows that Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu are the top three states where capacity addition has happened. And Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are very surprising states because they are on one side huge industrial demand, states with huge industrial demand, but on the other side there are also such high levels of saturation in terms of renewable energy capacity addition. So one would think that capacity addition may slow down in the states, but clearly there is quite a bit of market that continues to come from these high consumption, high saturation states. And then there are new entrants. You see Uttar Pradesh, who has really picked up in the last year. The state, its incentives has really driven the market, and you've got a brand new entrant here in Uttar Pradesh. We do know that even though it's further down the line, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, and Odisha are also picking up slowly. We will discuss what the drivers are in these states, but this particular snapshot really sets the stage for where we are and where we're likely to go. So that's it from me. And from at this point onwards, I'd like to take it to our experts on the discussion today, both Harshal and Karthik. So you are the guys who are working on the ground. You have your ear to the ground. So I'd like to hear from you. Where is it next? I would like sort of both perspectives from a macro India level. Is it going to be 700, 800 per megawatt, or do you see 1-2 gigawatt per year? Is that something you are anticipating in the open access solar market? And where is this capacity addition likely to come from? Over to both of you.
Right. So I can start, and then maybe Harshal can follow. So I'll start out by very quickly just introducing myself. I am one of the co-founders, and I head growth and strategy at Sunshore. And as part of my role, I've been very, very closely looking at the open access market, from the 2017 days when it was just starting to open up as a viable option for industries. And Karnataka, of course, as you all know, was one of the first breakout markets for open access. And I was in Bangalore at the time, and I got a lot of ideas from there, looking at the way the industry kind of just jumped on the open access bandwagon. And we brought it back, and since 2019, we've been developing a lot of open access in the northern states in India, starting with Haryana and now in Uttar Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, where we are also working to develop a lot of solar power plants. Overall, we have around 200 megawatts of open access and rooftop solar power plant installed in the country, and working on developing another 300 odd megawatt, which is a mix of both CNI rooftop as well as open access across the country. So with that background, I think I'd like to say that in terms of the states which are most attractive for solar open access right now, of course, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu rule the roost in terms of having the right kind of customer base in place who can draw those energies, and can they certainly add quite a bit to the attractiveness of these states for investors. Right, as we all know, almost all of the CNI open access capacity is being deployed by solar power developers who are backed by international funds or are extensions of large international companies, utility companies, and all of these companies are looking for high credit worthy customers with large power requirements, right? And Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra on top of that also have a great irradiation cover, right? But I would leave Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu for Harshal, as they really have a lot of presence there and are in fact in many respects leaders in those states. And I would like to take up UP, which is the the largest market right now in northern India for consumers, despite not being the kind of state which has high density of international business houses as compared to Maharashtra or Karnataka or Tamil Nadu. In fact, home to a lot of indigenous manufacturers, a lot of Indian-based companies, all the way from cement and steel to automotive clusters in Noida, and now the up-and-coming electronics manufacturing clusters in Noida and around. So UP, I think, has timed it really well in terms of coming out with an attractive open access policy. They took some time. I think they took the last couple of years to kind of streamline all the administrative processes around making open access possible, right? As we all know, solar is an informed source of power, and managing a distributed open access solar can be nightmarish for institutions such as the SLDC and system operators in general, right? So they've taken some time to streamline that, and they have a very, very attractive policy right now wherein they've given around 50% of wheeling and distribution charges. They've promised banking for the entire lifetime of the long-term open access, which they are signing for 25 years, which has really helped consumers of all kinds, right? Whether it is group captive or whether it is captive or whether it is fully captive business models. UP is a very active state today. Land, although, is a big challenge in UP as opposed to sparsely populated states, other sparsely populated states in the country, and that is why I think a lot of capacity in UP is going to come out in bursts, right? So we saw this 130 megawatt that you just put on the board. It is actually come in the last 3 to 6 months, right? Which, while it has been a pipeline for a very, very long time. So I'm expecting a spurt of almost twice this size in the second half of this year, and that will continue into the first half of the next financial year, right? Because most of the plants in UP will get commissioned in the high irradiation time frames between anywhere from March to June, or after that window September, October. So I believe we should see around a gigawatt of open access deployments over the next financial year, right? And the seeds have already been sown now, and they've just come out with a fresh allocation of another 1.5 gigawatt, right? So I think in the long term, by 2025, I see UP to be a market of close to 2.5 gigawatts of open access solar for CNI customers, and it will be a very healthy mix of fully captive, group captive, and purely captive models. So after UP, I think Chhattisgarh is the next most attractive state, right? Especially with they have given certainty on the cross subsidy thing, right? So there's no cross subsidy being levied on solar transactions. So which is a big booster for any industry, because as you all know, cross subsidy is the most erratic charge, as we've seen in tariff trends over the last decade. So apart from that, Chhattisgarh has a big presence of baseload industries. It is a big hub for steel, cement, iron, and materials manufacturers, and a lot of chemicals manufacturers as well. On top of that, transmission and wheeling charges are waived off in Chhattisgarh. So despite having lower tariffs than, let's say, states like Maharashtra, the per unit benefit for consumers in Chhattisgarh is quite sizable, and a lot of leading developers who have kind of laid the foundation for open access across key states in India have already made a move in Chhattisgarh. And in fact, we are looking at developing close to 50 megawatts of open access in Chhattisgarh. And after that, I think Gujarat more than Odisha, especially with the solar hybrid model that is being promoted in a great manner, I think, within that particular state. And I think that is one way for states to, at least states who have the privilege, to counter a high saturation problem of renewable energy, right? Incentivizing industries to draw power from plants which have a higher PLF, right? And more evened out power supply, especially during the peak times in the evenings. So I think solar wind hybrid is going to again expand its foothold from Gujarat and move into Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka also in the future. It's seeing a lot of interest in Gujarat, of course. And then Odisha, I think Odisha has been it's been a power center for industry, especially for supplies of key materials to the eastern belt of India. So a lot of cement guys have already put up behind the meter plants, and even those behind the meter plants are 10 to 20 megawatts in size. In fact, we are doing a 20 megawatt behind the meter plant for a large cement manufacturer there. And they still have a lot of appetite left for open access. So I believe for open access deployment, and the current draft policies in Odisha, they say that they will allow you to sell power in third party, very similar to what Karnataka did in 2018, and not levy subsidy surcharge. Just that you have to settle power within 15-minute time interval. So essentially, there is no banking. It's a match made in heaven for these kind of industries who have a flatline load, right? Cement and steel, if there are 40 megawatt demand, they'll be running at 40 megawatt flat for 24 hours, 7 days a week. So there, deploying third-party power plants in solar open access, I think, is going to be very, very popular over the next couple of financial years. So I think with that, I will open it up for Harshal to take this forward.
Thank you, Karthik. That was really quite a detailed update or picture of these few states which you have covered. So, and thank you for leaving a couple of states for us. Just to briefly introduce myself, I am Harshal Kalamkar. I work with Cleantech Solar in the business development division. I work both for rooftop as well as the open access clients. And I've been in this field for last 5-6 years, and Cleantech has been in the solar sector for the substantial part of the growth story, 2014 onwards. And we are right now, if you look at us, I would be very confident about saying that we are the leaders in the market when it comes to open access solar, and especially in the two states, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, we are definitely leading in terms of the capacity installed, commissioned, and under construction. So just to briefly touch upon a couple of states, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, both these states have quite a developed and mature open access policy as of now. This started back in 2018, and the policy started opening up for group captive open access, or 26% captive as we call it. So the group captive policy started opening up, the DISCOM started agreeing to this model easily for a solar kind of a project.
Harshal, we can't hear you.
In 2019, they came up in Maharashtra. They come up with the open access policy amendment draft, which gave a lot. Okay, sorry. So as I was saying, in 2019, Maharashtra came up with a new open access amendment policy. Am I clear, or is there some disturbance here?
No, loud and clear.
Am I audible to everyone? Okay, perfect. So yeah, and in 2019 onwards, we have seen that the administration has also aligned itself. There's a clear roadmap when it comes to how a project is implemented, how they give the permissions for evacuation approval, for STOA, MTOA, LTOA. Of course, each state has its own set of challenges, like additional surcharge in Maharashtra, banking in Tamil Nadu. These are the challenges which we have to understand and work towards. And there is a constant dialogue between the developer, EPC partners, and the DISCOM to try find a midway where all the parties are able to work without impacting the other party in a very difficult way. So with all of that, Tamil Nadu is a very good state. It's highly industrialized. There's a lot of demand there. And same with Maharashtra. It's again a very highly industrialized state with good amount of sun availability, as Karthik mentioned. And the policy and roadmap and the execution methodology is quite detailed out. So we have, we can say these definitely are the states to look at when any state wants to develop their policies for open access. Coming to another state, which is Rajasthan, which came up with a new policy which allowed group captive model. Earlier, there was some restrictions about only 100% captive, but now the group captive model is getting allowed in Rajasthan. But as I said, it's the time where Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu were 2.5 years ago. They're there right now, creating a roadmap where they are trying to find out how the whole execution will happen, what are the processes for giving permission. These are the things which are under development. And hopefully, we should see Rajasthan coming up very rapidly. Rajasthan, as it is a great state to work in. And I would say, other than the local challenges like the GIB habitat and other things, Rajasthan is a state we look forward to in terms of development, other than the states which Karthik already mentioned.
Sure, that's interesting. So I'm just looking at all the states. I'm just wondering if we've left anything. So what about Karnataka? We haven't spoken much about it. I mean, do you think it's too saturated, or is there some development still left? It's got the highest capacity installation. What are your thoughts on Karnataka?
So I could take Karnataka, unless Harshal, you want to add something?
Please, Karthik. No problem.
So I think Karnataka, see, apart from I think in the 2017-18 run, most of the larger customers actually signed up for 10 years, right? And then what is now happening in Karnataka is happening on an opportunistic basis. People are taking their own time and then finalizing deals and then going ahead. But having said that, it is a great state for solar deployment. The kind of generations you get in Karnataka and even the operations and maintenance costs are quite low as compared to, right? Because of the kind of rains you get in Karnataka.
All right. Okay. Okay, I think towards the end of it, we'll come to a landing on what we really see in terms of gigawatt addition in the coming year. But before we get to that, I'd like to hear from you, Karthik, a little bit more about your company and the role it plays as a turnkey EPC solution provider to the various developers. I think Harsha is, we've lost his video, but he's still there. But yes, I'd like to just quickly ask you about your role and what value addition you bring to the table as a turnkey EPC service provider. I understand that you're present in several states in the country, so I'd like to hear from you about your Sunshore and its business.
So in fact, I think I let Harshal start out with this one, right? We've been working with Cleantech quite closely, and I think Cleantech, Harshal can really add some value.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Karthik, for that. What we as a developer, we typically do is we are primarily looking at providing value-added services for our clients. Our responsibility is primarily about finding the right clients, giving them proper guidance, finding the right fit for them, giving the complete end-to-end solution where they don't have to worry about any specific point of how to get open access power. I'm talking specifically about open access power here. Rooftop is already well covered for large clients. Now, when we are providing these large clients a complete end-to-end solution, Cleantech kind of developers also have certain amount of risk which we have to mitigate when it comes to execution of these projects. A lot of risk related to execution are connected with land acquisition, right of way for the transmission, evacuation approval, substation bay construction, and the final approvals, etc. Of course, Cleantech has end-to-end management when it comes to project management, the engineering team, which continuously works with our turnkey EPC partners, as we like to call them. We also really value the support and the value add they bring to this whole supply chain of giving solar open access power to our clients. We have our own O&M team which takes care of operating these plants, but the real challenge is from the day we get the site identified to getting it signed and then executing and operating it. This is the real challenge when it comes to open access. Unlike in a rooftop where roof is easier to work on and the site is much easier, the challenges are quite low. This is where I would hand over to Karthik. How do you guys manage it? So Karthik, please.
Right. So see, when you think about setting up an open access project, right, I think about it in around 5 to 6 stages, right? So the first couple of stages are getting a connectivity permission, right?
Yeah.
Every state has its own ways and means to get connectivity permissions. Then you move on to land acquisitions. Again, there are unique challenges to each state, and even within a state, land acquisition is a very local matter, right? So within the same state, you might find 3 or 4 different regions where land acquisitions is a completely different ballgame. Have the project execution, which is the actual turnkey EPC bit, right, where we actually procure, engineer, and construct the plant, and then comes the commissioning side. Okay, this is again when you are there's a lot of overlap with regulatory matters with the state administration in order to get the plant commissioned, and then getting the plant signing all the long-term open access agreements, the wheeling and banking agreements, right, and then finally starting commercial operation of the plant. So I think the time prior to actual project execution, the connectivity and land bit, that carries almost 60 to 70% of the risk associated construction risks associated with a project, right? Project construction today, I think we as a company and in general as a country, I think India has figured that problem out, right? We can generally set up a solar power plant anywhere from 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts in a period of 4 to 5 months, right? Touch wood, I mean, this whole pandemic situation has of course turned the tables on that. But I think going forward, these are the kind of timelines that we are expecting. So the execution period is very low risk. It is probably the least risk period, as opposed to the connectivity and land part, where it can go anywhere from 6 months to even 18 or 24 months in certain states in the certain projects. What we do for developers such as Cleantech and others who are coming in and trying to set up open access capacity in India, and even for consumers who are looking to set up fully captive plants, is to figure out all of these things, right? It starts with getting the connectivity agreement. We have because we have operational presence in all of these key open access states. Our connections with the administrative bodies, our understanding of the regulatory processes, generally more current, right? It's more current, and we have a tighter integration with the right kind of people there. And because of that, we are able to identify these opportunities in time. And in fact, sometimes we go to consumers or we go to developers and tell them that, hey, here's an opportunity in this particular state where maybe we should kind of partner and move together. So that is the approach that we take to project. To providing a truly turnkey experience for open access plants, which with special attention to the first two parts, the connectivity and the land agreement. And once it is done, then of course, when the plant is constructed, post that, the signing of the long-term agreements with the administration is another place where we play a big part, and that is generally part of our contracts, right? So we'll create contracts or sign contracts with developers such that we are able to give developers the kind of experience that they are giving their end consumers, right? That here is an end-to-end thing, we'll package and we'll deliver it to you in time and with the highest possible quality.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. That was very interesting. It's truly a symbiotic relationship I see there across all stakeholders, and that's fantastic. When I was saying you have the ear to the ground, I really didn't realize how close it was to the ground. So that's a very interesting summary of your business. Then I think since we're talking about consumers and experience for the consumers, I think I'd like to understand again from both of you. As I said in the beginning, there's a huge sustainability drive in the corporate. From the corporates right now. How do you approach this when it comes when you are approached by a consumer asking for the best solution possible so that their RE penetration, they can reach their 100% or whatever the target is for RE penetration? How do you go about suggesting the right business model for them as well as the right technology mix it to ensure that that goal is also reached? Either one of you, please.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Karthik. So it's a very interesting question and a very critical question when it comes to our customers. A lot of our clients are MNCs where their headquarters are based out of Europe, US, or basically APAC or Japan, etc. Now, there are multiple concerns when a company decides to go for open access, group captive open access. Unlike in rooftop, where it's a pure OPEX model where no SPV or joint venture needs to be entered into by the client, this is a completely different model where the risk exposure of the client increases substantially because of the SPV model which they have to go in. As the regulation specifies, the Central Electricity Act, or group captive or captive 26% captive model, the requirement for the client is to own 26% equity stake in a company where at least 30% is debt, at least 30% is equity and 70% is financed by debt. That effectively translates to 7.8 to 8% of the total project cost being invested by the client. This is the brief about how the group captive works, and then they need to consume at least 51% of the power generated for their specific capacity.
Yeah.
The concern here is as soon as they go into 26% equity stake, the company becomes an associate firm for the client. anything which is above 20% becomes an associate firm. So between 20 to 50%, you have the associate firms. Beyond 50%, it becomes a subsidiary. So we are in the associate firm company level, where the SPV is a part of the parent company, and a lot of these clients have discomfort entering into such joint ventures coming directly from their HQ. Now, if you ask me what are their concerns, to list out a few of them, I would say first one is the concern about the liability which they have to face. So for developer like Cleantech, we assure them a limitation of liability. What do I mean by limitation of liability? First thing is there is a zero recourse of the loan to the customer. Whenever the SPV has to take a debt, there is zero recourse of the loan on the customer, which basically means that the liability of taking the debt, operating the company, and making sure power is supplied is not passed on to the customer. Second thing is any reputational risk is also limited in terms by ring fencing their interest in the project and making sure that SPV follows all the highest standard of guidelines, etc. If you look at Cleantech with 49% stake with Royal Dutch Shell subsidiary, we already are following all the highest quality standards in terms of accounting, business ethics, etc. when we are operating these projects. Just to give you an example, we have a detailed environmental and social impact assessment study done for the sites before we even choose them or okay them for setting up a solar plant. So this becomes a very critical point for them.
Okay.
Then comes the second part, which is the accounting. I'll just take a couple of more minutes quickly. Then comes the second part, which is the associate firm, basically the account statements. So all these companies have their own standards of accounting, and Cleantech or any developer needs to ensure that the SPV accounting is matching with the requirement of the client, whether it is Ind AS, whether it is GAAP accounting. We provide them all these options so that while merging the account statements of these two companies, they can easily do it and not have a lot of concerns in showing that in their account statements, whether it is quarterly or year-end kind of a statement. And basically, we also safeguard the equity of the client. See, the equity investment of the client is typically returned in a state like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu between 1 to 2 years. The payback for the equity investment is 1 to 2 years for a client. So it is just the 1 to 2 year risk which they are facing. And with just 8% investment, even if there is some kind of distress sell which has to be done, let us assume the worst case scenario. If there is a distress sell, even after repaying the debt, there is substantial funds to recover most of the equity investment of the client in such projects. So we are able to give the client a complete holistic support and guidance, and we also provide all the legal assistance whenever it comes to getting approvals from their HQs, and this typically works for most of our clients.
Okay, and so you've not had any, got it, Harshal. So you have not had any clients slip away because of the 26% requirement. So you've sort of been able to convert all of them into your clients despite this being an onerous.
I would love to say all the clients. As a BD guy, I just said Karthik will immediately say, Harshal, yeah, right, you did 100%, but no. So we do manage to convince a lot of them. There are still concerns, and what I've seen is if a client says no in 2019, they go ahead and say yes in 2021.
It's a matter of time.
But they are comfortable. It's a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. That's good to know.
I completely agree with Harshal. In fact, I'd just add a couple of things on this. You know, the reason why we go for group captive structure, as we all know, is because it's a structure which is looked upon more favorably as compared to the third-party structure.
Yes.
Right? Especially with regards to levy of charges such as cross subsidy and additional surcharge, which is a risk, you know, in all the states. I wouldn't say there is equal risk because these charges are different from state to state, but yes, so them being levied and their savings being eroded is a risk which is present everywhere. So we are seeing that even states where cross subsidy surcharge is not levied on third-party structure, even there, developers and consumers are choosing to go for group captive, right? Of the track record that we have seen in this country, all consumers are cognizant of the fact that this is a change that can come anytime, right? So no point signing a long-term contract which is open to that risk, right? So for captive or forming a captive structure basically insulates your business model from that risk of cross-subsidy charge, and I think it is only wise to go for that particular model unless you are wanting to go for a fully captive model. Right? And one more very interesting part is to simplify Harshal's math. Ultimately, and he did mention this, that only around 8% of the overall project cost is input by the end consumer. Right? Remaining 92% is in fact taken up by the developer, and within this 8%, even changes of one consumer changing to another consumer in case of SPVs where there are multiple consumers, it is not something which we expect the regulators to take a very unfavorable view of in general. Let's put aside states like Haryana, but in general, DISCOMs and states are not to take a very unfavorable view of that, because you're changing just that 8% part of the SPV. It is going from one person to another in case, in the rare case that a long-term agreement gets terminated midway. So I think it's in place, and it is just a matter of time. I couldn't agree more with how Harshal puts it. It's just a matter of time that companies from no matter where their origin is from, as long as they're operating in India, they will recognize the value and adopt this model.
Fair enough. I mean, that's very heartening to hear, because it is, as we all know, let's not get into the complexities of what group captive is, and there are various states which are like West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, which are asking for a lot of verification of states, etc. And that is there, but if you have the system in place, so it's heartening to know that it is a very clearly workable model. It is workable. We have seen, I think, practically all the capacity that's come up in the last year, 12 months, has been in group captive, except in one or two states which are not really allowing it. So from that point, so you've spoken about the group captive element from a consumer perspective. I'd like to understand also from an RE penetration perspective. We have a lot of the policy varies across the states. Some of them have banking, some of them have withdrawn banking. It's monthly, 6 months, etc. Resources vary across states. How do you approach a consumer? How do you design a system for a consumer with all these limitations in mind to ensure that they have as much RE penetration as possible? What are the best case scenarios with open access solar and wind or hybrid in the various states as far as RE penetration goes for consumers?
So I can start there. So I think in the long term, I see customers drawing at least 40%, between 40 and 50% of their energy from rooftop or let me call it on-site and off-site renewable energy deployments. Right, the Lion's more than almost 100% of on-site renewable energy capacity is going to be solar. In off-site, it might be a mix of solar or solar and wind. Right, as you were talking about Gujarat in the beginning of the discussion. So in states where, in wind-rich states, I believe the RE penetration from off-site can reach up to 60%, and then they can have another 10-15% from rooftop, so putting around 75% of consumption from renewable energy sources. For states such as Uttar Pradesh, where wind is not really an option, I think from off-site and on-site sources, around 40 to 50% of power can be drawn. Again, around 10-15% from rooftop and close to 30 to 40% from off-site sources.
I'm assuming a month-long banking you're thinking about in all these cases, right?
See, honestly, I believe for solar in general, even if they allow day-long banking, right, within the are allowed to consume power, I think it should be good enough to reach around 40%. But I believe that most states will go down a way where they are only allowing you to settle your off-site renewable energy power within the set of TOD hours, however it is defined in whichever state, just they would prefer you to settle it within those time slots, within those TODs. Or for example, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, I think, are doing down banking, where if you put in power, you can maybe utilize it in off peak. But I think going forward, the trend that is emerging or solidifying across states is not a lot of dependence on banking for
That's right.
setting, right? So in that scenario is what I'm talking about. So 30-40% of offsite penetration is quite easy to achieve. And then I'm really excited about the next set of technology which are coming in, right? Green power trading over exchanges, battery energy storage systems behind the meter. The use case for them might become solid over the next 4-5 years. And there are other innovative models. Harshal, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that typically, assuming just the same slot banking, also we are looking at a customer with the pure solar open access, consuming about 40 to 50% of their requirement through open access and rooftops. So completely agree with Karthik over there. In terms of how do you address the remaining, because as we see more and more companies are signing up for RE50, RE100 targets, satisfying that completely with a pure play open access solar or a hybrid system will be difficult without support of strong banking regulations. Even regulators, DISCOMs are facing challenges in terms of large banking facilities, because grid stability becomes a concern which they keep repeating and bringing up again and again. So we have to, as an industry, also start working towards figuring out newer solutions which can help us provide larger percentage of the power through open access. Some of the ways which Karthik mentioned was batteries. Now batteries can be used both at both the ends. One is the generator end as well as the consumer end. I would leave the technical aspects of this battery to Karthik, because I'm sure you guys are evaluating that also in detail. But looking at the side where you are in, if you install the batteries at the generator end, you are able to capture the top of the parabola which you are losing because of cropping. While you are generating solar or any other source of power, you are having a parabolic generation which gets cropped at the top when the generation from the DC side is higher than the AC rated capacity. This capacity can be free of cost, trapped into the battery systems, and then be consumed by the or basically fed into the grid by the generator at an appropriate time slot. Now this basically means the additional cost is only of the batteries here. So it's a good project to think about. Then we can also look at other options like VPPA, virtual power purchase agreements, which is not a pure play supply of power, which is there in case of open access, captive open access or third party open access power project. It's a new model which is coming up in the market where clients are supporting developers build new solar plants. Buying RECs or IRECs in the market is basically buying green attributes of existing plants, whereas VPPA is actually funding new projects so that the client can actually claim they have contributed to generating newer energy in green power. So VPPA basically helps company claim 100% green energy at a slightly additional cost over and above their regular energy cost. And then of course there is the aspect of grids providing green tariff facilities. Certain states have started that, where you can basically have pay 60 paisa, 50 paisa extra in Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu, and the grid will provide you green energy in that case. So there are multiple solutions which we are working on. And I think the real breakaway technology would be batteries as and when they come. Karthik, would you like to take up this specific point of batteries? How they can?
Absolutely. I think energy storage systems are definitely going to be the real change makers when it comes to helping industries achieve their RE goals, at least on the electricity displacement front, right? So there, I think front of the meter and behind the meter, both kind of deployments are equally exciting. And the use cases, I think today for backup storage, at least for industries which are in regions where they are facing, let's say 4 or 5 slots of 15-minute power outages, maybe between an hour and a couple of hours a day. I think for those industries, given the cost of diesel today, I think battery storage systems, immediate deployment is also a no-brainer. We were looking at cost per unit of around 20 rupees per unit from diesel, I think 3 years ago. If I just simply extrapolate, I think today it should be somewhere around 32 rupees per unit. Right? So battery storage is definitely viable there for your backup energy use. And I think the next most exciting use is the TOD displacement. So the peak hours, which are in every state, DISCOMs don't allow you to draw banked power during the peak hours.
Yeah.
Right? Generally pumping solar power during non-peak hours. So it's very difficult to draw power during peak hours, and which is generally in the evening time. And the tariffs there, I believe that, going forward, the gap between non-peak and peak tariffs is going to grow. Because of the kind of RE deployment that is happening, and in general, mature markets show that kind of a trend, right, for better demand response from customers. So I think in that kind of a paradigm, using battery storage to store power during off-peak hours or store power from rooftop solar plants, which, by the way, over the next 3 to 4 years, you will find that bulk of the capacity that was deployed by 2020 of rooftop would have become break-even. At least the capex capacity would have become break-even by 2025. So essentially, the on-site rooftop power that you're generating from capex projects is going to be free of cost. So storing that power in batteries and using that to kind of offset your evening peak, and letting excess offset your morning consumption and daytime consumption might be something that we are looking at. Once batteries become, once they hit the minimum viability point.
Okay. That's fantastic. I mean, it is a little forward-looking, but we know it is coming. All signs point in this direction. So that's good news for, I suppose, a lot of us. What about the pure captive plants? We spoke about Odisha, we spoke about Chhattisgarh, and open access. We are speaking about so far about third-party and group captive. But what about the pure play captive plants? Is that a better proposition for some of the large players to go for versus open access? What's your view on that?
So, see, I think it's a purely strategic call on part of the consumer, right? And for any strategic call, the inputs that go into making that a final decision are, number one, first and foremost, is policy certainty, right? Because the developers such as Cleantech or other developers who are moving so strongly and deploying captive and group captive plants, third-party plants, are essentially taking on that regulatory risk, right? Because the day these contracts are not saving enough money for the industry would want to just move out of that contract, and leave the developer to deal with the, face the music as such. So definitely in states where you have policy clarity, at least for the first 10 or 15 years after the plant has been deployed. Prime examples are Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh is a great example where they have a explicit letter saying that any plant set up before 2020 December will enjoy benefits such as banking for the entire tenure of the plant, right? And this will not be changed. So once you have that kind of clarity, I think you are in a good position to explore the fully captive model. And when you're exploring the fully captive model, I think it comes down to your cash flows. For example, companies which are cash, ITC is one example. They have a lot of reserves, they have aggressive decarbonization targets, and they are, I think, so far deploying all the power that they've deployed is in fully captive, right? Because it makes all the sense in the world for them commercially, because of course it's cheaper in the long term, right? If you have the capital, you have the patience, then deploying a fully captive plant will obviously give you more savings over a longer period, right? If you're looking at a 15-year contract or so, and you bypass any kind of risks that we were talking about in the group captive structure, since you're completely owning the SPV. And generally, when somebody will deploy a fully captive plant, they would want to merge the SPV with their original company. If they are to begin with doing it in an SPV, generally these guys will go out and get a connectivity for their own selves. So I think it's a fantastic business model if it aligns with your capital capabilities and your strategic position. A lot of companies are doing it. Even in UP, there is easily 100 to 150 megawatts of fully captive plants coming up out of the first gig to be deployed. I think easily 15% are going to be fully captive.
Okay. Speaking about policy changes, there is a question here, and I think I was also going to ask this question. Nobody spoke about Andhra Pradesh and Telangana as prospective future markets. Are they still sort of no-go states? Is it too difficult to sort of enter these markets, or is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Harshal, you would have more context here.
Yeah. So, as the optimist that I am, I always believe there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Can you hear me, guys?
We are in the electricity business as well, so there better be light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely right. So we do believe there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, how they are going to resolve? So if you look at Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, these are highly saturated states. They have huge penetration of solar and wind as it is. And in the end, the DISCOMs took a call where they said no banking for group captive or captive set up after a certain date. What that does is it puts a limitation in terms of how the whole solar power will be supplied and whether the industry is capable of consuming. There are other questions relating to the charges, etc., for these projects. So I believe there are challenges both Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Haryana, of course, is a major concern for a lot of people. These states need to figure out a way, like if you remember the case of 2018 policy, which ended 31st March 2018 in Karnataka, a lot of things happened after that, after the projects were commissioned. And then the developers and the clients had to basically go into litigation and file cases where they had to figure out a way to survive after that. So these things do happen. We have, as a developer and as the client, both need to work together. And what we request the DISCOMs and the authorities, regulatory authorities, is please be more understanding of what our constraints and our limitations are also. Because if certain projects are set up with a certain policy in mind, and if you suddenly change it retrospectively, effective retrospectively, it makes a huge impact, not just to the client, but to the developer tremendously. And it impacts the whole supply chain overall. So yes, these things need to stabilize for the industry to pick up those states. And as Karthik is saying, there are newer states coming up. Why are we primarily concentrating on only Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, or UP? As of now, there are newer states coming up. It's just a process which happens. We hope the process happens faster because we have a large target which we have to achieve set up by our government.
Absolutely. And these days, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh have huge consumer demand as well. The question, I think, is from a consumer based out of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So they are grappling for ways in which they can decarbonize. So I suppose a little bit of introspection from the state would be great. There's another question here regarding Maharashtra. How do, I think it's a basic regulatory question, but I think one of you can answer it. How does a consumer look at having net metering and open access in Maharashtra? How does the regulation treat it? What's the regulatory treatment is the question. If would one of you like to
take this, Karthik, or would you like to answer this?
No, Harshal, you go. I think you've dealt with a lot of this.
Yes. So I'll just try to attempt to answer this question. If I'm not wrong, what people are asking is, how does a rooftop with net metering go with open access? Is that what it is? Am I correct?
Yes. Yes.
As of 2019 open access amendment, which came up for Maharashtra, the rules are pretty clear that yes, net metering is not allowed with open access. This could be primarily because of accounting concerns for the DISCOM or some other concerns, but net metering and open access do not go hand in hand, and you have to choose between one of the two. The regulation is clear on that part. I would not like to go into details of this. If there is any specific query which needs to be answered by someone, maybe we can connect later on with the concerned person.
Right. See, one thing that I can add over here is, I think for Maharashtra, of course, specifically, the answers might vary. Right. Again, it's going to be a state-specific answer.
Yeah.
But in a lot of states, for example, Uttar Pradesh, they actually got rid of net metering in 2019. right? So anyway, the rooftop plants that are being installed there are being installed without any dependence on net metering. So and then once you start doing open access for these kind of states, open access is generally the model of preference. Right? Consumer might not put rooftop, might only put open access, which is I think something similar to what's happening in Karnataka as well.
All right, fair enough. I think I'm going through the questions. I think most of them have been answered. There are questions about arbitrary change in banking provisions and if they can disrupt the expected growth in UP and other states. But I think you've answered that to some extent, that even if there is a day-long banking, a consumer can sufficiently meet their RE penetration. So there are several questions here which I think we've answered during the course of this. I want to wrap up by asking you a few. What is your, like, if you can look into your crystal ball a little bit and see what 2022 would look like in terms of capacity addition across states. Kartikeya, you mentioned at the beginning about 1.5 gigawatts is what you think UP might add over the next year, if I'm not wrong. And then there are other states as well. So
I think cumulative numbers should reach a gigawatt by the end of the next FY in UP.
Okay. In UP, okay. But what about other states? The positive signs in all the states based on the approvals given already. What are we looking at in 2022? The big picture number and a few, what do you anticipate capacity additions across the top 5 states perhaps?
I think Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu are definitely the other 2 top 5 states. I'll let Harshal comment on those. But I think in UP, I've already said that. And I think in Chhattisgarh also, I think 500 megawatts is a fair expectation. It's commissioned, then it's definitely be under construction, in advanced stages of construction by the end of next FY. And then I think Gujarat will see a lot of wind and solar hybrid installations, which are already happening. You know, there again, the customers in Gujarat were starved of renewable energy open access, right? For the past many years. States like Karnataka were leapfrogging ahead. So I think Gujarat, people are really jumping on to open access. So Gujarat should drive another half gigawatt at least by the next, or could touch a gigawatt as well. So yeah, overall, 5 states I'm easily, I think there should be around cumulative, we should be sitting at, between this year and next year, we should be sitting at around 3 gigawatts.
An additional capacity of 3 gigawatts. That sounds very optimistic, and I hope this does come true. Harshal, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, the policies are supportive in many states, and we have seen a escalated interest of the clients also recently. A lot of clients have started coming to us and shown the interest in these open access projects. Examples of existing projects help us in convincing newer clients. Policies are becoming stable, so that helps for convincing the client again. But there are challenges. To list a few, for example, the uncertainty around panel costs, the impact of BCD, which we are not sure again now. It was clearly mentioned 1st of April 2022, but we are not sure what will happen. Hopefully, government decides to postpone it by a few months. And finally, the challenges are also related to certain changes which are happening in certain states. For example, Maharashtra is choosing to end the ED benefit they are giving to the new renewable energy projects. Industry and clients both are trying to request the state to continue the support. Tamil Nadu is talking about restricting the banking aspects. Yeah. So we have challenges which are there, realistic challenges. But overall, I think the penetration of this open access as a solution is increasing, and we do see a substantial increase in the number of projects and newer states coming in. So it's not just Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra which will play a major role. There would be newer states like UP definitely, and we could come up with Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Gujarat, which could really add substantial capacities in the next 1.5 years.
That's fantastic. I think we are all aware of the challenges of this market. We have new ones, as you already pointed out, the sudden surge in prices. In the beautifully, there was the duty-free window, which could have been really well utilized. Unfortunately, the surge in prices has sort of played spoilsport. But nonetheless, despite all these challenges, it is still a very positive market, and you are looking at a 2.53 gigawatt capacity addition in the next year. And well, that's a very good note to end this discussion on. So thank you for being a part of this discussion. There are several queries there are several consumers who'd like to speak directly to you. So I think we will address them directly offline, and we would like to thank everyone for being here as part of this session, especially Kartikeya and Harshal. Thank you for taking the time out, answering these questions with us. And that's it from us at Bridge to India. Over to you, Ankita.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Mr. Harshal and Kartikeya, for such an informative and insightful discussion. I would now like to request our audience to kindly share your valuable suggestions in the feedback form that we'll be sharing with you on your screen very shortly. And once again, a token of gratitude to our sponsor, Sunsure, for making this event possible. We have many interesting events lined up for you in the coming months. We have an upcoming webinar on residential rooftop solar market that's scheduled for November. So we hope to see you then. Until then, goodbye and take care.